Hello, everyone. This is Aaditya Mehta, and I welcome you all to yet another episode of Podcast on Personality Development. At a certain point of life, we all think, what is our purpose? What is our purpose of this life? And when we find that, we somehow want to live that purpose driven life. But how do we do that, right? We do have responsibilities, we do have financial goals and everything. So, to live a purpose driven life, we also need to have a purpose driven financial management. In today's episode, we are going to talk just about that. And to guide us with that, we have a person who is a certified human consultant and a person who has started a full time business calling out to his purpose of teaching, Scott Maderer. So, intro music is going to play. You can just click on the follow button and the bell icon so that you don't miss out any further episode of this podcast. And you do that till the time I'll get Scott on this show. Hello and welcome back to today's episode. In this episode, we have an educator and an author of the book Inspired Living. Please allow me to welcome this amazing person who is going to guide us with purpose driven life and purpose driven financial management. Here he is, Scott Maderer. Hello, Scott. How are you doing today?
It is an awesome day. I'm so happy to be here and hope to bring some value to you and to your listeners.
Of course, I'm pretty sure that you are going to add a lot of value in my life because you see, I am a podcaster and a full-time corporate employee. So
Yep.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to get a
Been there, done
lot.
that.
I'm going to get a lot of value from you today, and I'm sure audience is going to get a lot of value from you as well. First of all, thank you so much for being a part of this show by taking out your valuable time. I really, really appreciate that. And Scott, one thing is that I just gave a very short and crisp introduction of yours, but I would really appreciate if you can give a more detailed and brief introduction of yours.
Sure. One of the things that I always laugh about, with introductions or bios or anytime, somebody gives you that sort of stuff, I call those the Instagram photo version of our story, right? You make sure you get the framing right and the laundry's not in the background and everything looks clean and crisp and pretty, as opposed to what the real journey's like, which is, let's face it, usually not that clean and crisp, and
Yeah,
the
true.
dirty laundry is in the corner of the room and all of that sort of stuff. That's our real life, right?
Right.
So yeah, I've done a lot of different things over the years. I've been where you are, where I had the full-time corporate job and was working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and then had something on the side that I really felt called to do, that I needed to launch and wanted to get out there in the world and kind of burning the candle at both ends and doing those sorts of things. I've been there, but before that, I was actually a teacher. I was a school teacher for about 16 years. I've taught science in public school. I've taught science in private school. Eventually, I left that and I went into the corporate world. I started working for a company that did testing. So, in the words of my students, I joined the dark side. I went from teaching to testing. So I went from teaching the kids to writing tests for the kids. More than just in my classroom, but this was more like national exams and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And so I did that for 11 years, worked myself up into senior leadership. That's the job that was 60 or 80 hours a week. And on the side, started a passion project around coaching and took that full time back in 2017, started doing it part time in 2011. That's now what I do full time, is I work with other folks around these areas of time and talent and treasures. But the real key is, what I'm really working on with people is how to as you put it, you live that passion life, you live what you're inspired to do, you go out and do and make an impact that you feel called or put on this planet to do, the real deeper purpose, rather than just the assignment that you happen to be doing today, that corporate job or that other thing that you're doing.
That's wonderfully said. And I am definitely going to use a lot of terminologies which you are giving right now, especially the Instagram photo introduction and the dirt in the corner. It's really amazing. I'm definitely going to use it in the future episodes as well. So great introduction, Scott, and I really appreciate you sharing the dark side as well, and not only the side which you are in right now, not only the phase where you are right now, but you also shared some amazing journey, which I believe is really, really inspiring for most of the people out there. So thank you so much for doing that. However, Scott, before diving into the financial goals, okay, I would like to ask about a purpose-driven life. What do you feel a purpose driven life looks like? Because you are living one right now. And also, is there a difference between a passion and a purpose?
Yeah, both good questions. So let's kind of dive into a little bit first about what does it mean to live. I call it inspired living, living a life of inspiration. You'll hear people call it living a purpose driven life. Rick Warren has a great book called Purpose Driven Life. These ideas of living out what you are meant to be doing. And when that comes up, the first thing to realize is that's not a absolutist kind of checklist. I've arrived. I am now living a purpose driven life and everything is perfect.
Hmm.
It's not really about a destination. It's about the journey. It's about assembling the puzzle, is the analogy I use in the book, of what does your life look like, and recognizing that that's going to change. It's like you're building a puzzle, but not only does the picture on the front cover change, the the pieces you have in the box change too. It's like sometimes you don't have as many pieces as you wish you had, and so the puzzle's not really complete yet. And other times you've got too many, you got too many blue sky puzzles. It's like somebody dumped some extra pieces in there and you're trying to make them all fit. Our life is that kind of dynamic assembly and journey. And when it comes to our calling or our purpose, it's the same way. It's not really a single thing that you can say, put a check by it, and now that I've done it. Because it shows up at different ways throughout your life. It shows up in different ways, even at a point in time, like right now, within your different roles, when you're at your job, your corporate job, when you're at home as a dad or a husband, when you're at your volunteer work that maybe you do, when you're just hanging out with friends, your purpose may be expressed in each of those roles in different ways. It may actually show up in different frameworks at different times. So really what I'm talking about is finding ways to align more and more of your life with that underlying purpose, that underlying thing that you're driven to do. I don't think you ever really ever get there. I don't think there's ever this perfect moment in time where everything has aligned, or at least if there is, I've yet to meet anyone who says, yep, I'm there. This is it. I've met some people that have gotten really close, but I've never met anyone who's gotten everything to align perfectly yet. I'm still looking. So by the way, if you're that person, reach out to me and let me know, and I'll put you in the next book. But it's about constantly refitting those pieces, reassembling that puzzle, redoing the journey, so that you constantly are evaluating and looking at what we want to do. That's the key, is this idea of living a life in intention, with an intentional way, or living a life where you're actually examining it. The worst thing to me, the wasted lives, are the lives that are led unexamined. So the person's never thinking about what they're doing. They're just kind of moving from thing to thing, going through life, letting life push them wherever they want to go. Life is constantly happening to them instead of them happening to life. And it's that active process of that intentionality of reviewing and reflecting, where are you at, that I've used throughout the book as a framework of being able to examine where you're at. Which brings us to the second question, what's the difference between a passion, purpose? A lot of times people hear that messaging, it's out there a lot of, follow your passion and you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
By the way, that's a lie. Okay, it's a myth. Because even if you find something that you're deeply passionate about, there's still going to be days that you're going to have to do some stuff that it's not your favorite stuff. It's
Mm.
not the best part of the job. It's not the stuff that you love to do. Or heck, for that matter, you're just going to get up some mornings and it's going to be like, well, today's not such a, I don't feel good. I'm tired. I'm a little under the weather, whatever. There's still going to be rainstorms. There's still going to be challenges. There's still going to be parts of your passion that you don't love, that you aren't always aligned to. I'm actually blessed in that every job I've left, I've gone from a job I loved to a job I loved either more or in a different way. I've
Mm.
never had the experience of feeling like, oh, I've got to get out of this job because it's just a job I hate.
Mm.
There's been components of my job that I don't like, but there's always also components that I did love, and things that I enjoyed doing. And so the passion shows up, but it's not the underlying purpose. The underlying purpose is the why or the emotion that's almost driving that passion. It's the why or the emotion that's driving behind why you do what you do. It's the why much more than it is the what. That's the role or the assignment or the particular thing you're doing at the time. And it's the why much more than it is even, hey, I just love everything about this. That's the passion moments, the joy, the
Mm.
happiness, the connection. And they're going to show up, and they'll show up hopefully more and more the
Mm.
more that you've aligned your life to that passion and purpose. But there's still, I'm not going to lie to you, everybody, I hate that messaging of, oh, you just follow your passion and everything will come up roses and your life will be perfect, because that's not the life that we usually are promised, and it's not the life that we usually lead.
Right. That's amazingly said, and I do completely agree to that as well because I can relate with it. Long back when I started podcasting, okay, I love connecting with people. I love to have conversations with them, but also there were components which I would say that I didn't like, and one of them was editing. You have to do the entire audio editing stuff, and that was really time consuming for me as well. And I did have to learn a lot of amount of editing to actually understand the aspect of it in a whole. And at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, I did understood that there were some things which you can do which makes the sound even more better.
Mm-hmm.
So I do understand what you said, and I do relate with it more importantly, because normally the people who are not living that kind of life, they usually believe that it's going to be a picture perfect world for them if they reach to that stage. But it is also important to understand that there will be challenges, and there will be days where you will get frustrated and you will need a break. So I completely relate with that as well, and I'm pretty sure many people would relate with it who wants to live that purpose driven life, and they have started the process as well. And as you correctly mentioned with the analogies which you provided about the puzzle, sometimes you have extra pieces, sometimes you don't have those pieces. And I would say one more, that sometimes you have made a mistake as well by
Yep.
putting a wrong piece somewhere, and it's going to affect you as well, right? So I
Absolutely.
completely relate with that. And these are some great analogies which you are providing. And I believe those are good analogies to understand the concept of it as well. Going forward about this purpose driven life, where you mentioned that you do love certain aspects of it and sometimes you do love that in a whole, but there would be challenging days as well. Is there any of your experience which you would like to share, one particular experience when you started this journey of living out your purpose. Is there any
Mhm.
moment, or is there any, I would say, any specific event where you felt that this is not happening and I'm facing a lot of challenges over here? I think I should back out for some time.
So what day is it right now? It's like the old joke is, well, I only felt like that on days that end in Y. The rest of the days I'm fine, right? I think we all face those moments, and probably in some ways more often than not, where it's frustrating because you maybe feel deep down in your heart that, yeah, I'm supposed to be doing this, or I'm supposed to be heading that direction. But then there's all of this other stuff that piles up on us that makes us feel like we can't do it, or it's not the right way to do it, or maybe I'm feeling this, but it's not really real, because all this stuff works against me. And it for me, when I was working the corporate job, I was working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. I had a team of 180 people that depended upon me. I had a wife at home who depended upon me. I had a young son at home who depended upon me. I had financial obligations, I had time obligations, I did service projects and worked for church and did this and did that. I had a ton of stuff that were demands on my time. And then I also had this feeling deep down inside that I wasn't supposed to be staying in this corporate job for the rest of my life. I was supposed to be doing something else. And my wife, in my case, spoke into that, and she agreed. We got on the same page. We agreed that this is what we were supposed to be doing. We then began to work to put some financial things in place and make sure that we'd be okay financially if I made that transition. And then like I said, in my case, I began to build it on the side in the margins. But that means, if you think about it, I already described a very full calendar. So now I have to say, some of these things I have to say no to. I have to
Hmm.
say no to maybe volunteering as much, or I have to say no to maybe spending some time with the corporate job in a certain way, or maybe I have to say no to an opportunity that I could have at work, or maybe I'm even saying no to some extra time with my wife or my son, or maybe I'm saying no to myself and saying, instead of watching Netflix tonight, I'm going to work on the side business, or instead of sleeping in, I'm going to go ahead and get up early and take an extra couple of hours to work on the side thing that I want to launch. Whatever it is, I was still having to say no and make choices about what I said no to. In my case, a lot of the no's were around myself. So I continued to cut back on the volunteering. I cut back on some of the church things that I was doing. I kept my focus on my wife and my son because family is very important to me. I still spent time in the spirit because that's very important to me. So I spent time in prayer and meditation and those sorts of things. I still did my day job commitment because I had committed and promised to do that. But I did find ways to start doing it and saving some time. And I did start saying no to some things that, quite frankly, everybody else was doing it, but they weren't part of the job. They weren't required. So I found
Hmm.
ways to, turn down some things. Now, what that meant is I wasn't going to get promoted. I wasn't going to go up the ladder. But remember, I already made the decision that that's not what I wanted to do. So that was okay. And then the last thing and the biggest thing is I found ways to say no to myself in terms of, I started getting up at 4:30 in the morning and working for 3 hours before I went to work. I started, finding time in the evening that used to I would have played a video game or I would have watched some TV. Nope. I'm going to go work on the business for a couple of hours and get that done. So I've carved out those moments and those times so that I could create the space to start doing the thing that I felt called for. And then I looked for resonance, meaning I looked for echoes coming back to me that this was the right direction. So again, I'm not looking for perfection. I'm not looking for everything. Oh, I'm so much happier when I'm doing this. But I was looking for signs, for lack of a better word. So hearing things come back from my clients about how much I had helped them, or them sharing a testimonial with me, or something that I'd done that had changed their life, hearing echoes in just other messages that I was hearing on the radio or from friends or family, had nothing to do with what I was doing, but it was reaffirming to me that I was on the right direction. And as I got those things, it let me kind of put in the energy and the double down and do the work. Notice I started in 2011, I went full time in 2017. For those of you that can do quick math, that's 6 years. For that
Mhm.
6 years, I was saying no to a ton of things that I would have loved to have said yes to. But we no to vacations. We didn't do any big vacations for those 6 years. We said no to a lot of things that our friends and family were doing. We said no to new cars. We said no to, we just buckled down and built up the emergency fund, built up the runway, did other things to put ourselves in a place where then when I did make the leap to full time, because I went from a high six figures job to running my own business and not making anywhere close to what I was making before. And over time, that has come back up, and now I'm doing much better than I was when I started. But I didn't start at the place that I was at, if that makes sense. I was able to make that bridge between the two by doing the hard work to put up the financial things in place that
Mm.
allowed me to do that.
Wow. I mean, that's some great effort you put over there. Uh, and I can completely understand one thing over here, that there is no balance. It's all blending. I
Mm-hmm.
believe you did blended it well so that it can actually become a reality out of a dream, I would say.
Right.
And with all those struggles which you made in those 6 years, you finally got the result out of it, and the result was so minimum that you were barely making money which you were making earlier, but still you thought because you made that bridge in between, you were able to do that, and then you can of course work full time on your job. And I'm pretty sure then you might be earning, instead of six figures, you might have gone to seven or eight figures as well. But not talking about money for a moment over here, but
Mm-hmm.
also the actual satisfaction which you get after teaching to students, okay, or maybe teaching people out there, or even giving your wisdom, giving your coaching to the people out there. I'm sure you might be having a very good sleep at night because you did something meaningful to the people out there who wants to live a life with grace, and who wants to live a life with the purpose in their hand. And that's simply beautiful when we speak about it. Although there would be many sleepless nights as well, I am sure about it.
Yep.
But when you are sleeping, you will be having a very good night's sleep, because you do add a meaning to person's life by explaining them the purpose of their lives, okay? Or I would say that making them understand the purpose of life. So that's just beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing that, all the struggles which you did.
Sure.
However, I have this one question, because when you are navigating, you said about saying no to yourself for almost 6 years. And
Yep.
when someone does that, what happens is they do feel burnouts, okay? They do feel anguish. They sometimes do get angry on people without any reason, because they are feeling that
Mm.
pressure, they are feeling that burnouts as well. Was there any incident similar in your case? And if there were, how do you deal with those things? Because 6 years is a long, long, long period.
Yeah, one of the problems that you have with delayed gratification, which is what we're talking about, which is when you're putting off something for a length of time, is it's almost like you're holding your breath for 6 years, and then when you get to the end of it, you're like, you gasp for breath and you gasp for air. And absolutely. I mean, there were days and there were times where I was frustrated, or oh, this just isn't happening fast enough. I want it to happen faster. I'm angry that it just doesn't seem to be working the way I want it to work. Everybody has those moments. By the way, I still have those moments, and
Hmm.
I'm much more aligned today with my purpose and my passions than I was back in 2011. And still, there's not a day that I get up some days and go, oh, it's just not, things aren't working today. And
Hmm.
you're right, I do get a lot of reward from guiding a client and working with them and asking good questions and pushing them and challenging them and holding them accountable and seeing the light bulb go off and something break through in their life, and now they're doing something financially or with their time or with their life in general, and they're suddenly communicating with their wife better, or living the job that they want to live, or they've gotten married, or they've started a career, or started a job, or changed job, whatever it is. They've done the goals that they set out to do, and now they're moving in that direction. I get a lot of reward from it. But the truth is that the thing that keeps you going through all of that, and the thing that made me, even though I have a bad day or I have a stretch where I'm frustrated, come back to it and keep going through, is going back to what I said earlier about finding that deep and passionate why. Why was I doing this? What about making this change was fundamentally important to me, to my wife, to my son, to the people that were important in my life, making sure that we were all on the same page and communicating, making sure that we had alignment around it. And that's what lets you get through those days where you're frustrated, you're angry, you're not sure if this is really what you're supposed to be doing, because you had a bad meeting with the client and everything went wrong, or you didn't make the money last month that you really needed to make, and so this month's going to be really hard, or whatever it is. That what gets you through those moments is starting the purpose, starting the goal setting, starting the drive, starting the change with that, doing the deep work first. I call it investing in yourself, to find out what is your deep and passionate why. That's the thing that's going to keep you going through those bad times and get you through to the other side. The having that connection, not just to our purpose and our passion, but to the why behind the purpose and the passion. What is it about teaching others? What is it about coaching? What is it about speaking to people? What it is it about helping people, seeing that light bulb turn on? What is it about that is the thing that keeps me going and doing it? Because it's not any one of those things, it's all of those things. It's that gestalt of being able to be I get more energy from being a guide than I do from being the hero. In other words, the hero is the one that goes out and slays the monster. I consider myself more Yoda than Luke Skywalker. I'm the little green guy in the back that teaches Luke how to be a hero, and then Luke goes out and is the hero. For those of you that haven't seen Star Wars, I'm talking about the original Star Wars, 1977 Star Wars. That's the the hero's journey, right? There's always a character that guides the hero on the journey, and then there's the hero. My role and the why behind it is to be more of that guide role. That's where I get energy. That's where I get passion. And so I could have forced myself to be the hero, and I wouldn't have been as aligned. It wouldn't have fit as good. And honestly, some of those frustrations you're talking about, they come from when I feel like I have to make myself be the hero. So they'll tell you, like, to start a business, you've got to be the hero of your business. You've got to do all of these things, and they give you this list of stuff you have to do. And some of the stuff on that list, I'm like, but I don't want to do that. That's not authentic to me. That's not how I live my life. That's what I do. So as an example, a lot of coaches do what I call a hard sale close. This is where, they get you on the meeting, they meet with you for 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours or whatever it is. And then at the end, they do something like this. So, are you ready to change your life? Are you in or you out? If you make a decision in the next 37 seconds, are you in or you out? I've got to hear from you right now, and they kind of do that hard pressure close. That's not authentic to how I am. So I don't do that. Now I had people telling me, oh, you'll never be successful if you don't do that. Guess what? I do just fine without doing that, because right. I challenged that paradigm and looked at the stuff that everyone said you had to do and said, no, it's more important to be authentic to who and what and why I am than it is to just do the stuff that everyone tells me that's what you have to do.
Wow. I mean, that's some great wisdom which you gave me. Being authentic to yourself is a big thing, I would say. And I
Absolutely.
believe with the era of social media, that has somewhere lost. the authentic you is always lost in the social media applications, I would say. Uh, Although it is a great thing to have if used properly. So, but we do get influenced certain times and we try to be someone else rather than being ourselves. So that's a great wisdom, I would say, that you have given. And apart from that, the things which you mentioned in the entire answer, and it was really long as well. Uh, but I am sure that when you have those days, when you have the days where, you feel very anguished, you feel very agitated, I think that's when you need to think about whys and what I am
Mhm.
and why I am. I mean, that's one thing. I am taking it, okay, and I'm writing it down as well. An audience, as I always say in all the episodes, that make sure to sit with a book and a pen so that you don't miss out anything, which is very, very important for you. So make sure to note this down. I mean, if it really matters to you, it matters to me, so I'm writing it down. So yeah, make sure to listen to this podcast intentionally. Okay. However, going ahead, Scott, some amazing answers on the purpose-driven life, but now let's transition towards the purpose driven finance, okay, or
Mhm.
financial management. That's the, I would say, the crucial part, I would say, so that people would love to hear about it a lot because many of them might know what their purpose is or what their passion is, but most of them don't know how to do it full time. You
Right.
did mention some of the points before that you said no to certain things for 6 years to make sure that you have that much amount of savings. And
Mhm.
savings is something which really is difficult for the people out there, especially for a guy like me. I wouldn't save much. Okay. I personally have to invest it somewhere so that it can be saved and it can grow as well. But if it's in my bank account, I'm definitely going to spend it. Okay. So, it's for the youngsters today, okay, who are just coming out of college, who are just coming or going through their master degree program as well. Saving is becoming nearly impossible. Okay, for as far as I know, 90% of the people, they don't save much. What would you
Mhm.
like to say about that? And if someone wants to really make sure to make saving as a habit, what can they do?
So this is one of those areas where a lot of stuff comes to mind because first off, there was some things that were buried in your question that I want to unpack a little bit. So a lot of times you'll hear that 80 to 90% of people live paycheck to paycheck is a stat that you hear thrown around. And by the way, it's an accurate stat, and most people don't have enough savings to pay for a $400 emergency.
Hmm.
Again, stat accurate. And yet in there you said it's impossible for most people to save. That part's actually not true. So
Okay,
the
yeah.
truth is, yes, most people haven't saved. And
Hmm.
yes, most people are in a situation where a $400 emergency would break their bank, but it's not because they can't save, it's because they're not saving.
Hmm.
So the power phrase that I tell people is I don't like the phrase, I can't do that. I
Hmm.
can't do that. Instead, I tell you, change it to I'm choosing not to do that. See how that
Hmm.
feels. Because if you make it, so I'm choosing not to save. By the way, you are choosing not to save no matter what your financial situation is. There's still choices involved. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that everybody has the exact same choices. And if you're making $3,000 a year, your situation is the same as somebody making $300,000 a year. Obviously, it's not. That's not the point. The
Right.
point is within whatever your framework is, whatever your set of choices are, you still have choices. You still have the ability to dive into what you're doing and actually do the hard work, seeing what you're spending on, seeing what you're not spending on, aligning what you're spending with the things that are moving you in the direction you want to go. Most people are spending money on things that when they really sit down and look at it, they're spending some of their money on things that are really important to them, vital things that may be related to their family, maybe related to food and shelter and electricity and that sort of things. But they're also spending some money on stuff that if they really admitted it to themselves, they're like, it's really not that important to me at the end of the day. It's not the thing that's driving me the direction I want to go. It's not providing for long-term success. You use the term investing. It's the thing, it's not really things that are investing in my future. It's just stuff that I'm burning today. Now, is that easy stuff to give up? No, not always. But is it stuff that you could choose to give up if you wanted to? Yeah. But again, you're only going to choose to give it up if your reason for saying no to that is bigger. Your why, again, we're back to that right. Purpose, that passion is big enough that you can say, I can say no to this now for a little while, not forever, by the way, but I can say no to this now so that I can create some time, some energy, some financial margin so that I can now get ahead, or I can now save, or I can now go back to school, or I can change jobs, or I can launch my passion project on the side, whatever it is that you're trying to do. Because, and that's the other factor that I think people lose track of. Personal finance, the most important word in that is personal, not finance. So it's really hard for me to give, specific examples to generic people. In other words, your choices are very, very different than my choices. Not because your choices are right or wrong and my choices are right or wrong, but because we have two different lives and we also have two different things that we might want to achieve or might want to be doing. There's differences in our personality. We have different responsibilities. We have different things that we've committed to. And that creates a frame, back to that puzzle, that creates the edge pieces, but then within that puzzle in the center, you can start putting those pieces together a lot of different ways. So practically, how do you do that? You actually have to do things like a budget. You have to sit down and make sure you know how much money you have coming in, how much money you have going out, and you know where it's going. Right. And then you have to evaluate. You have to ask yourself some things about, is this moving me in the direction I want to go long term? And then if it isn't, you have to make a choice about whether you keep it in or put it out. And then, as far as saving money when, if it's in my bank account, I'm going to spend it. And by the way, I hear that a lot. Okay, great. So open a different bank account, put it in there and make it a bank account that you don't even look at. Hide it. I've actually had people do that and then take like the debit card that goes to that account and freeze it in a block of ice in their freezer. Why? Well, because they can still get the money. All they have to do is defrost the debit card, but it takes time. So they're not going to defrost the debit card just to buy something on Amazon, or to go out to eat. They're only going to do it if it's really important to them, because it takes them that time of actually defrosting it. You can create strategies and techniques. By the way, I'm not telling everyone go freeze your debit card in the freezer. That's not the point. Exactly. But for some people, that becomes a necessary step and a necessary hurdle. I call it friction and smoothness. Anywhere around your life that you want to create a habit of doing something, you want to make it smooth, make it as easy as possible, automate it, make it simple, make it easy to do. So the saving, automate it. This $100 a month goes into this account over here, whether I want it to or not. $100 is transferring over to that account. I've just set it up. It's an auto thing. That's smoothness. That's an example of smoothness. Friction is like the ice block that I just said. This is make something you don't want to do harder. Create friction around it. So if you generally spend everything that's in your checking account, put some money elsewhere that's not as easy to get to and make it harder to get to it. That's creating friction around it. And now all of a sudden you can begin to save and build up some money easier because you've made saving easy, smooth, and you created friction around spending, if that makes sense. So you can go through your life, a million different items and a million different line items, and it's going to be a different list for you and every person listening is going to have a different list, because we all have our own little things. We all have our own little bugaboos. For some people it's coffee, for some people it's movies, for some people it's whatever, right? For a long time I used to buy books like nobody's business. I have books that I haven't read that I bought 4 years ago. Whatever it is, we have things that we spend on. And if you're not doing that work of examining it and then figuring out, where do I want to create smoothness to create new habits, and where do I want to create friction to not do certain things, then you're right. You just kind of go through and end up in the situation where you're living paycheck to paycheck and you can't save any money because you really have chosen to not set up your life in a way where you do that.
Wow. That's fantastic, because not doing it has two things in mind, and that is can't do it and choose not to do it. And when
Right.
you say choosing, it definitely hits the deepest part of male ego, I would say, that you're not choosing to do that. So that's wonderfully
It's also a
explained.
power word. It's also a power word, because I can't do it takes away your power. You
Yeah,
have no power to do it. I choose not to do it means you've actually got the power.
yeah,
you
true,
know?
true. Well, it is greatly said, and I completely appreciate that. However, there is one of the community member, okay, who has asked this question, and I feel that this is a follow-up question of the previous one as well. So I'll
Mhm.
say the community member's name. His name is Suraj Gupta, and he is one of the community member on WhatsApp. And so I have basically given the entire introduction of yours on that particular community, and also I
Mhm.
have mentioned the topic. And for that reason, he has asked this question that
Mhm.
due to BNPL nowadays, that is buy now, pay later schemes, which we have in the market. Suraj says that I have made the purchases, huge amount of purchases with these BNPL schemes, that is buy now, pay
Right.
later schemes. And most of my money are going into EMIs. And now I don't know how to save money. What
Mhm.
would you like to say about that, Scott?
Go, Going into EMIs, is that what you said? Or
Yes,
going to pay to
EMI.
buy now?
Yeah, the
What
the
is an
bill.
EMI? The bill.
EMI
Okay.
is
So that,
the bill. Yeah.
okay. So that's going into the payments on the buy now, pay later. Yeah.
Yes.
So a lot of folks find themselves getting into that kind of treadmill, and whether it's a credit card, you'll see that in some places. And by the way, I've had clients in India and things, so I have some familiarity with what you're talking about, though
Okay.
obviously I don't live there,
Uh-huh.
so it's
Right.
not exactly the same. But we have the same thing in the US, whether it's a credit card, which is a version of buy now pay later, or whether it's the 90 days same as cash kind of thing that you get at the furniture store.
Yeah.
So here's the thing that you need to realize about anything like that. For a second, put on the hat of the person that's making the deal with you.
Mm.
Okay. So put on the shopkeeper's hat, or the furniture store guy's hat, or the credit card company's hat. They're in the business of making money. And by the way, they're not evil. That's not bad. Okay.
Of
Being
course.
in the business of making money is not a bad thing. They now, I don't agree with all of their tactics and all of their techniques, but that's okay. I don't have to. They're in the business of making money. So they're going to set up a deal in such a way that across a large number of people, most of the time, they make money,
Hmm.
right? That's
Hmm.
how they have to structure it. Otherwise, by the way, if they don't do it that way, they'll go out of business because they've got bills to pay.
True.
They've got to
True.
keep the lights on in the store. They've got to buy inventory. They've got to pay people. So they have to structure their business that way.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. So as an individual, you have to go into that realizing, I've been marketed to, I've been sold a product, have it now, live the life that you want now. I've
Hmm.
been sold this idea, but I'm being sold something. It's a sale, it's marketing, it's sales. And they're selling me something that works good for them.
Hmm.
So, as simplistic as it sounds, what you have to do is basically get out of that cycle. So for a while, again, you may have to hustle, you may have to find a way to, get a second job, whatever, bring in some extra money, sell something. I don't know, a lot of different ways to do it depending on your situation, and I don't know enough of details about his situation to say one of these is good and the rest of them aren't. But you need to get ahead of the curve and begin to pay those off and not enter any more, and realize that these don't work. So getting another one, kicking the can down the road isn't going to help. You have to learn to say no to yourself in the short term so that you can say yes to yourself in the long term. Okay. It's saying no now. I'm not going to buy that. I'm going to keep picking on furniture stores just because that's a common one. I'm not going to buy the new bedroom set that I really want. I'm going to continue to sleep on a mattress on the floor, which isn't the most comfortable thing in the world, but I own the mattress and I own the floor. So, I can do that and put off buying the new furniture set until I actually have the money to buy the new furniture set, and not have to enter the buy now, pay later thing. Because at the end of the day, all of those are going to be structured where most of the time, most people, 90 days, same as cash, not on day 91. It's not. On day 91, they usually back charge you all of the interest for the whole time. And you go from owing $3,000 to owing, $3,800 or whatever it is, right? It's set up that way on purpose. They know, by the way, they know you're not going to pay them. They're counting on it. That's what they want you to do, because that's how they make more money.
Yeah.
So if you kind of almost treat it like a game and realize that, wait a minute, this is a game and it's set up in such a way that I'm not going to win, change the rules and play a different game. I like actually walking into places with cash and negotiating, or buying something, secondhand from a, off of, the secondhand market, and walking in with cash. I have bought cars that were listed at $8, $9, $10,000 by people, and walked in with cash in my hand and got them for a lot less than they were asking. Why? Because all of a sudden they're looking at a stack of money in an envelope going, guy doesn't have to go to the bank and get a check. The guy can just hand me an envelope full of money. Here's the car. You can have it. And they sign over the title, because all of a sudden you have the power of negotiating, because you've changed the rules and you've decided, I'm not going to play that game anymore. I'm going to change the rules and play a different game. All of that being said, that's not easy to do. And for a while, it's going to stink, because you're going to have to work really hard and pay off those buy now, pay later situations so that you can now get ahead of it. And then right at the end of that, it's not like all of a sudden now you also have money, because you just paid them off with all of your extra money. So you have to keep doing it to get the extra money to now get back ahead of it and start buying the stuff with actual money that you have, as opposed to money that you're financing.
Wow, that's a brilliant thing that you mentioned. And also, I just came up with the terminology when someone says, let's go for a BNPL scheme. Now I would say that no, I do have the NNEL scheme, that is know now and enjoy later. So I feel
Yep.
that's a great way to go for it now, because you don't want to go down at that scheme, because and being at a FinServ company, I do know that they do count that you are not going to pay, and they do count on it. So make
So some
sure.
people will, but they're counting on the vast majority of people aren't going
Yes,
to.
that's true.
you know?
And they are also counting on people who are definitely going to choose for a longer tenure of payment, because that's how they earn interest as well. So
Yep.
audience, all I would say is make sure to, not opt for it, okay, until and unless it is really, really important for you. But I would say still, I would say that don't go for it. And Suraj Gupta, thank you so much for asking this question. I really appreciate it. There is one more question, Scott, and this would be the last question. And this is also by a community member. The girl named Nitya has asked this question, and this is really amazing. Uh, Normally in houses, she's 37 years old, so she is asking this question. I don't know, but I'm still going to ask you. Normally in the situations, wives do have a strong hold at home. Uh, what about you? About in business? Does your wife make all the decisions or do you make all the decisions?
How about C, none of the above? We don't, neither one of us makes all the decisions.
Right.
As much as possible, we try to make sure that we're on the same page and we both are in agreement with the decision. Now, that being said, yeah, absolutely. My wife, runs a lot of things in the household, and I run a lot of things in other parts of our life. But we still try to collaborate and work together and make decisions together for the most part. I
Hmm.
will admit that it has not always been that way. There was a period where, I ran all the money and I made all the money decisions. It didn't work. And by the same token, if she did all of the decision making and she made all of the money decisions, that also wouldn't work, because what ends up happening a lot of times is when you kind of run it as two separate sets of decisions or two separate lives, again, you're not really in alignment. You're not really going the same direction. And so intentionally or unintentionally, one of you ends up messing up the plan.
Hmm.
Whether it's on purpose or not, you mess it up because you didn't even know there was a plan. So because the other person made the plan and the other person's executing on the plan, and you're over here just living your life doing your thing, you screwed up. And you didn't even know. And now all of a sudden there's a fight because it's like, well, why'd you spend that money on that? I was going to spend the money on that. And it's like, wait, I didn't even know there was a plan going on.
Right.
So if you actually have some level of communication and some level of agreement and some level of unification, now again, culturally and even just kind of how different people have different kinds of relationships, doesn't mean we're always exactly doing it the exact same way. And everyone should do this in this plan. There is some gray and there's some nuance and there's some differences because people are different, relationships are different. Whether you're married for the first time and you got married young, or you're married for the third time, and this
Hmm.
is, and you've got a lot of history and baggage that you carry. All of these sorts of things affect how you relate to money and how money relates to you, and then how it affects your relationship. That's one of the beauties of what I do as a coach is, instead of coming in and saying prescriptively, here's the one way to do it, you should set up your accounts exactly this way and you should have this kind of conversation and all of that. Part of the beauty of working with somebody as an individual is I can come in and ask questions and find out, what have you done in the past? What's worked for you? What's not worked for you? How do y'all already communicate? How do you
Hmm.
wish you communicated? And then
Hmm.
we can kind of build a plan that actually works for you and your situation, with your relationship, with your history, with what's going on in your life. Because it's probably the same as my life does, or as your neighbor's life does. It's going to be nuanced and look like your life because that's the life that you're living.
That was a great answer. And Nitya, thank you so much for asking that question. Thank you so much. To all the community members, I would like to say that no question is silly. So make sure to ask all the questions to the guest, and the experts are ready to give the answers. And to all the other audience of the podcast, if you want to ask questions to the experts of this show, I have mentioned the link in the description. All you have to do is click on that link and join the community, where you will come to know who's going to come on the podcast, and you can ask questions straight on that community, and I'll be asking those questions on behalf of you to the experts. So make sure to join that WhatsApp group. And Scott, thank you so much for all the answers which you gave today, for all the wisdom that you gave today. It really adds a lot of values, especially in my life. I don't know about others, but especially in my life, it has added a lot more value, and I'm sure I'm going to take a lot of things today from this episode. And of course, I'm going to listen it more one or two times while editing as well. So I'm going to get a whole lot of things from this episode. So thank you so much for doing that. Any lasting message which you would like to give to the audience?
Absolutely. So I actually put together some resources. So those of you that have these kinds of questions that have been coming up, if you want some free resources that I put together, you can actually go to my website at inspiredstewardship.com and then just /personality for the personality podcast. And I've got some free downloads you can have that can kind of help you with answering some of these questions around your calling or around money and time. There's a link to my book if you're interested in that, and so a few other free resources that you can access and get access to. There's also a way you could set up a 30-minute call if you want to just jump on a call and talk a little bit about coaching as well. Yeah, that's at inspiredstewardship.com/personality.
Wonderful. Thank you, Scott, for doing that. Also, thank you so much for setting up a link. So, audience, all I'm going to do is mention the link in the description. You are just a click away from downloading all the materials which Scott has given to us. I'm going to download it. So, make sure you do that as well. And also make sure to follow Scott on LinkedIn and Instagram, because I believe following a person who has lived a life which you want to live one day, it's always important to follow them. And if you want to message him, please message him and make sure to let him know that you have heard him on Personality Development Podcast. You will be the first one to get a reply. Thank you so much, audience, for listening to this entire episode. If you feel that this podcast and this episode adds value in your life, make sure to share it with your loved ones. With that being said, this is Aaditya Mehta along with Scott Maderer signing off from this episode. See you in the next one. Till then, peace out.